right? So the next thing I want to do is, this is my debt service. Is actually not my debt service, because as I'm paying down, this should be decreasing, and that is when I would have constant repayment for my debt service for all the repayment period. So now let me come back to estimating individually the principal amount and the interest amount. So for this part, I want to estimate the principal alone. I'm going to use the formula known as PPMT. PPMT in Excel. Punch tab on your keyboard to open. Okay, then it asks for weight. You go up and see, select the weight, which is 25% on an annual basis. Then you freeze it. Then so we'll be using this loan period, this loan tenor flag as our then which is numbers of period remaining, right? So I'm gonna be using this payment period left, which is payment period left here, starting from 0, and then the present value. So the present value is the opening balance of the loan. Punch, use the bracket, of course, the punch, enter your keyboard. So I have none here as well. And remember, we'll be using the same formula. If error, then if error, give me what? 0,0, then punch, enter your keyboard. So I have 0 here, and of course, Alt HJ to change the format. I don't want that $sign to appear at all. Then I can fill right. Okay, this will be good, but one thing is I want this to be positive instead of negative. Then I'm going to use minus and fill right. So for each of this figure, this is the loan amount that I have to pay. This is the loan amount that I have to pay. So I would definitely come back here and then estimate my interest repayment. So my interest repayment is still the same formula that we have here, just that I'll be using IPMT instead of PPMT. IPMT, and what is the interest rate here? The interest rate is 25% for your keyboard. What is the par? I'm using 1, which is the tenor flag as the par. What is the empire is the numbers of period remaining here, which is of course 007654321 here. So the opening balance is now okay. I think I made a mistake over there. So G20 and empire, okay, empire here. So now we've selected G22. Then the opening balance right here is G29. Then punch enter on your keyboard. So we have this again. So you remember, if error, and comma 0, then punch enter your keyboard. It's giving me $sign, and I don't want you to give me $sign, right? What will I do? Alt HJ, yeah, the comma format. Then I can fill right, but of course it gave me negative figure. So I will just say minus, right? Then fill right. So now I have the interest to be paid. And the reason why I have constant interest to be paid is that I have constant loan balance of the period. And the reason why I have constant loan balance is that I've not linked principal repayment to this cell, right? I've not linked principal repayment to this cell. But of course, it's something that we may want to figure out from here, is to check if the debt service that we have here, the total debt service that we have here, if it is in line, right? If I want to get the total debt service based on the individual calculation of principal and interest repayment that we've calculated, if I want to get, I'm just going to say the addition of the principal and the interest repayment for each of the period, and punch enter here, it will be 0. Of course, we have no values there. Fill right, Control R. You can see here I have 158, 171, 169, 410, 185, 923, 211, 721. So with these, actually very, very okay, and is in line with what we have here. You can see 151, 158, 171 is the same as 158, 171 that we have here. We also have 169410 and 169410. So what we've done is actually very okay. So I can just use this to say if this is equal to, let me say, if this minus this is 0, then, or I would tell Excel that if this, okay, the addition of all this is 0. So I will tell Excel if this minus this is equal to 0, then it will be okay. Then we fill right. So you can see if it's okay. If any of these figures is 1, let's say, it will be 0. So that's the condition that we've given here. So that means that this and this are not correct. Let me rephrase, right? This is I'm on colon I now, and you can see what we have here. Row 34 colon I, what we have here is 158171, and what we have here, row 38, is 158171. So if this has been maybe 52,000, so it definitely means that what we've done, calculation that we've done, this is just like a check. So what we've done is actually not correct. So undo to confirm that what we've done is actually correct. So with this, we can now say that it is actually correct. So the next thing that I want to do here is to link my repayment, my principal repayment, to my debt account, so that I can decide or see for myself if what we have done is correct or if what we have done is not correct. So I would just do this and link what is the principal. You can see this is the principal. This is the principal repayment. So I will link the principal repayment to this. Of course, I will be using negative here because I want it to pay off, right? Money, I want it to show as an outflow, right? So I would, once I do that, then I can fill right, Control R. So if I fill right, you can see wonderfully, I've been able to successfully pay off my loan. So in the first period, in the first period, there was moratorium, but in the second period, we have here is that there is no moratorium. Then we have to make principal payment. So we have to pay our principal, and for this part, we have to pay another principal, and of course, at the same time, we are paying interest on debt, right? So, and for this part, we have this. One thing again that we've not done here is to include or capitalize the interest that is not paid in any period. Is to capitalize the interest that is not paid in any period. So how do we ensure interest capitalization rate? How do we ensure interest capitalization? How do we ensure interest capitalization? I mean, how do we ensure that we capitalize the interest? Because I told you, any interest that is left unpaid would have to be rolled over and be included as part of the loan amount for the next period. So how do we do that? So I'm going to light all this cell. So let me come down, let me come up here. Okay, no, let me come here. I'm going to highlight all this cell, Control plus Shift plus equal to on my keyboard to it's another row. Then I'll call this capitalized interest. So which would make it form part of the loan amount. So I will call this capitalized interest, and I would come here and include interest payment. I would come here and include interest payment. Before I include interest payment, I want to change the formula for my interest. Because I want my interest to actually capture this opening balance plus the drawdown for any period, so that by the time I get here, I can recognize my interest for this period and appropriately capitalize it. So how do I do that? I can calculate my interest based on this formula IPMT, and at the same time, I can just use the simple formula, which is the interest rate multiplied by the loan amount. The interest rate multiplied by the loan amount, it will still give me the same result. And let me do that. Let me bring this down. Okay, feel right, so that this would be showing differently. And my sum, I just want 2 cells for my sum, right? And I can then fill right. So I have only the principal amount here. Now I want to calculate interest distinct from this PMT formula. I just want to use my interest rate multiplied by the principal amount. What's my interest rate? And my interest rate is 25%, multiplied by what's the loan balance. So the loan balance will be the sum of the opening balance and the drawdown. So what we are simply saying here is that if in any period, right, we have an opening balance of loan, and at the start of that period at the same time, we collected another loan. So we are going to pay interest on the opening balance of the loan that we have and the new loan that we've raised, right? But for the next period that we now have here, you can see that we have no opening balance. But we drew new loan in this period. So that is why we have 500,000, and we can now see that interest is actually, the interest on that 500,000 that we took is actually being calculated using this simple formula by summing the opening balance and the drawdown, by summing it up. So And but on this case, on this note, you can see this one is different. It's not recognizing any interest repayment for this period. So the only thing that I can just do to capture that is to use the sum formula as well, and drag this down a bit and punch enter. Okay, I think I have to include this. Okay, or something is be paying out. So let me undo and redo. So we have the PV, and we want the PV to be the sum of this. Okay, let me do that again. Let me recognize a closing bracket here, and let me recognize sum. Then we can then drag down, then punch enter on our keyboard. So it's not still capturing. It's not still capturing. Okay, the reason why it's not capturing is that we have 0 here. This 0 is showing that we have this 0 is showing that it's not the period we need to make any payment. So for us to be able to adjust it, we need to recognize number 8 for this period. Like, we need to recognize that this is the loan period left. So instead of not recognizing 8 here, we can just decide to recognize it. But I'm not definitely gonna do that. I'm not gonna be going that route. But just to give you a sense of what we've done, so the calculation will still be the same thing with what we've done. You can see we have the same result with what we've done before. So undo. So it's capturing, but this is capturing. So undo again. So this is just to check if what we've done is actually correct. So with this, we are good, and I can just fill right. So once I fill right, I have my interest repayment, and of course I have to come back here. So I will still come back here to discuss what we can just do to moderate and ensure that we recognize 125,000 naira as interest to be paid for this year. So now the next thing is to capitalize our interest. This is the interest payable, and I now want to capitalize interest. I will just say the interest year that is payable for this period multiply by, open a bracket, provided that this period, which is the repayment flag, is equal to 0. So if the repayment flag is equal to 0, then it will give me the interest payable in this period and capitalize it, of course. But if it is not equal to 0, then it will give me 0. That means if it is not equal to 0, is within the repayment period, then it will always give me 0. So we don't have to capitalize interest in that period. Then fill right, Control R. You can see that this interest has been capitalized. Our loan balance has increased to 625,000, right? And of course, in the following period, we are now making payment. So this is how to go about capitalizing interest. And of course, remember, for interest that is capitalized would have to form part, if you are within the construction period, so we'll have to form part of the construction cost of the asset. I mean, part of the PPE. So you have to capitalize it on the PPE as well, or on the plant, or anything that is of the characteristics of the business of the project. So these were good, and with this we are also good. We've been able to successfully capitalize the interest. And for this part, for me to be able to show that, okay, the reason why is for me to be able to show that we are good with our interest calculation. For me to be able to show that we are good with our interest calculation, I just have to come here to show this. We have 125,000 here, but of course for this period we don't have the 125,000. So what do we do to include this 125,000? What do we do to include this 125,000? And the 125,000 is actually the thing that is wrong. Why this is not? It's actually the thing that is wrong. Why this is not balanced, and why this is showing no. Like the check is showing no. So for us to be able to do it, we need to calculate the interest to be paid for this period. We need to calculate it or estimate that. So undo. So how do we estimate? How do we do that? How do we include that in our Excel? So this is what I'm just going to do. I'm going to come back here and tell Excel to remove this multiply, enter, then fill right, So remove this multiply and fill right. The next thing I'm definitely gonna do then is to come here, open a bracket, open it, close the bracket, then open another bracket, use my sum, or I don't need to open another bracket here. Just use my sum and drag this down a bit. So drag this down a bit, then I can fill right. So I have 125 here. Then I can also come down here, use my sum, or recognize the closing bracket at first, then come here, use my sum, and drag this down a bit, capture the opening balance and the closing balance, and fill right. And of course, here this one is showing, oh, sorry. So we ought to have added the capitalized interest at the same time, the capitalized interest. We have to have added the capitalized interest. So undo. Something is showing. Okay. This should be 125. Okay, let me see. Let me check something. Undo. Okay. Let me just undo. I think I've captured something I ought not to have captured. And I will come here, open brackets, close the bracket, then use the sum function, sum these two, then punch enter on my keyboard. Okay, now I understand what is going on here because it's showing that we have to make a payment. So I need to develop a flag that would show that this is not the period it should recognize. So I need to develop a flag that will show that it should only recognize the interest alone and not the principal. And of course, you know that your PMT formula would recognize both your interest and principal. So if I leave this as 8, it will recognize both interest as principal. So one thing I can just do to moderate this is, since I only want my interest here, I would be using some kind of I'll be using some kind of moderation, right? So I will come here, instead of having my sum and all of that, instead of having my sum, I will just do undo. So redo. So here we have 55. So I will tell this guy that if I will use if function here now. So if this flag is equal to 0, then 0 should give me the interest repayment that we've calculated here. But if it is not equals to 0, then it just should give me the if error PMT formula that we've calculated already, then punch enter. So, and if I should fill right, you can say I have my 120, then if I fill right, I have my 197, 197, 197. So you can see the debt service. Now, this is the beauty of annuity. You have a constant payment for the entire loan period. That means you have a constant payment that you need to pay that would cover or suffice, for both your principal repayment and your interest repayment. If you come here as well, you have, if you do it differently, we have principal repayment, then we also have the debt repayment. So let me just copy these and paste it here so that you can see is debt repayment, is the actual debt repayment. The one thing that we've done is that this is just a simple calculation, but this is a formula driven calculation using Excel functions. So, and of course, the debt service that we have here is the same thing as the debt service that we have here. Now stay tuned. In our next course, or in our next class, I will be taking you through how to go about bullet repayment in your model and how to do sculpting, because sometimes if you look at the cash flow that we have here, you can see the cash flow that we have here, which is safer. This cash flow may not be enough to pay off this entire loan obligation, but in our case, we have around 2.5 million naira as CFAD, have 1.5 million as debt service. So it's showing that maybe we have enough cash to pay off our debt service. But of course, in some cases, it may not be the same, because your cash flow may not be enough to pay off your entire loan obligation. So you need to size your debt, as well as you need to sculpt it very well so that you won't be taking debts that is beyond the capacity or the cash flow capacity of that project. So let me link this to my debt service. So here I have my debt service, and I can calculate my DSCR. So for the DSCR, we'll tell Excel that if the service coverage ratio, it shows you the how many times you can pay off your debt service in any period. So how do we do that? We'll tell Excel that CFAD divided by debt service, right? Give me CFAD divided by debt service, or let me use if error. So if error, give me CFAD divided by debt service, but if it is error, then what? Give me not available. Give me not available. Then close the bracket, punch enter on your keyboard. You can see you have not available here. Then you feel right. So if you feel right, you can see you have 2121 and all of that. So to get your average CFAD, your average CFAD for this project is actually 1.71x. So what I just did is to copy. So in this period, I have my CFAD during repayment period. So how do I do that? I need to moderate this formula and drag this down to the adjusted CFAD, then punch enter, fill right, copy and paste this formula here. So what do I have? I have 1.2x. So that means the cash flow of this project can cover the debt service by 1.2x. Thank you very much. This is where we'll stop in this call, for this session. In the next session, in the next video, we'll be talking about opted, and if we have time, we then look at using phase or linear repayment structure. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to like and also share and subscribe, and stay tuned for more educative sessions. Thank you.